Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a really fascinating and honestly pretty sobering journey. We are going to track how a dark internet joke somehow morphed into a very real crisis. And look, we aren't just doing a history lesson here. We're breaking down the actual anatomy of a digital delusion so we can figure out how to defend ourselves against the massive tide of modern misinformation.
So it brings us right to this core question. How exactly did a fringe internet joke spark a real-world crisis? The answer to this is absolutely crucial because it actually reveals the literal mechanics of how these digital delusions spread online. It basically hands us the blueprints to the rabbit hole.
Let's start by looking at this incredibly stark quote straight from our source material. Disinformation works, disinformation is winning. I mean, that really highlights the modern struggle we're facing. Just trying to have basic fact-based conversations today. Hate and conspiracy theories, they're highly profitable in the digital age, and that poses a very real threat to the fabric of our shared reality. Okay, here is our roadmap for the explainer. 1. The birth of a conspiracy. 2. How misinformation goes viral. 3. The real-world consequences. And 4. Spotting and debunking misinformation. Let's jump right in. Section 1. The birth of a conspiracy. From message boards to the mainstream.
Our source material defines QAnon as a far-right American political conspiracy theory. Its core belief is that a cabal of satanic, cannibalistic child molesters, working with the deep state, is operating a global trafficking ring, and that Donald Trump is secretly leading the fight against them.
And this perfectly illustrates what researchers call a big tent conspiracy theory. It's like a giant puzzle that mashed together older historical tropes, like medieval blood libel and the satanic panic of the 1980s, with completely fabricated new claims. For example, followers believed an event called the Storm would bring mass arrests of elites, that victims were harvested for a chemical called adrenochrome, and that an anonymous poster named Q was actually a high-level government insider dropping clues.
Now, if we map this out chronologically, you can see a very clear, escalating timeline. It all kicked up in 2016 with Pizzagate, a baseless theory driven by leaked emails that falsely claimed politicians were running a trafficking ring out of a DC pizzeria. Then, October 2017 hits, and the very first Q drop appears on the anonymous image board 4chan. The whole thing grew largely unchecked for years until a major social media crackdown finally started in October 2020. Ultimately, this specific path of online radicalization culminated in January 2021 when adherents actually attacked the U.S. Capitol.
All right, moving to Section 2, how misinformation goes viral. Algorithms, aesthetics, and gamification. There's a really stark contrast between traditional information and the modern digital ecosystem. Think about it. Traditional info was slow. It was fact-based, in-depth reading, like sitting down with a daily newspaper. Algorithmic social media is the complete opposite. It's fast, it's profit-driven, and it intentionally rewards provocative content. And since conspiracy theories are inherently provocative, they spread like wildfire on platforms that are literally designed to keep you clicking down the rabbit hole. But it wasn't just passive reading. This is where it gets wild. It was highly interactive, relying on a concept called gamification. The anonymous poster Q didn't just hand out facts. They dropped cryptic clues called breadcrumbs. The followers, who called themselves bakers, would analyze these clues to piece the conspiracy together themselves. By giving the audience a puzzle to solve, the conspiracy became as addictive as a video game. It made everyday people feel like they were actively participating in a massive historical event.
However, we have to note that it wasn't just human psychology doing the heavy lifting here. Researchers found that roughly 25% of the accounts amplifying these hashtags were actually automated bots. The sources also point out that a massive portion of this movement spread was artificially boosted by foreign state media and bad actors from countries like Russia and China who weaponized the conspiracy specifically to stir up societal discord.
The movement also shapeshifted to survive. Researchers identified a phenomenon called pastel QAnon. This is where the conspiracy intentionally rebranded itself to appeal to completely different demographics, predominantly women on Instagram. They used really soft, palatable pastel aesthetics and hijacked legitimate emotional gateway issues, like the hashtag Save the Children. It was a highly effective way to lure in lifestyle and wellness influencers who probably never would have visited a fringe political message board.
Section 3, the real-world consequences, when digital delusions cause physical harm. When you objectively trace the real-world disruptions linked to these claims, the escalation is pretty frightening. In December 2016, a man who believed the Pizzagate conspiracy walked right into Comet Ping Pong with a rifle and fired shots. Fast forward to the summer of 2020, and followers were hijacking hashtags so aggressively that it actually disrupted the work of real, legitimate child welfare organizations. And then, by January 2021, these online delusions successfully mobilized a mob that stormed the Capitol building. An expert in our source material asks a question that really hits the nail on the head. How are we supposed to govern ourselves if a large percentage of the population's just not even living in reality? The deep societal cost of unchecked misinformation isn't just about people holding weird beliefs. It's a literal, existential threat to democratic society and the very stability of our social fabric. Which brings us to Section 4, Spotting and Debunking Misinformation, Protecting Your Digital Media Diet. So, what do we do about all this? How can we actually fight the spread of these digital delusions? Well, it's time to shift our focus away from the huge, uncontrollable internet algorithms and look at our own locus of control. How can everyday users like you and me fight back? Experts recommend a really concrete 3-step procedure to help you debunk misinformation in your daily life. It all comes down to skepticism, verification, and education. Let's break these down. Step 1 is inherent skepticism. In an online ecosystem that thrives on engagement, your absolute best first line of defense is simply pausing. When you see a super provocative claim online, just assume it isn't true first. Force the content to prove it to you with hard evidence, rather than letting your initial outrage dictate what you believe. And that flows perfectly into Step 2, source verification. Bad actors deliberately weaponize alternative explanations to separate you from legitimate, vetted sources of info. You absolutely must check where claims originate. Don't just blindly trust anonymous accounts or cryptic drops. Always, always verify the primary source. Step 3 is one you might not expect: civics education. The sources note that a lot of people lack a thorough understanding of how government actually works on a day-to-day basis. That lack of knowledge creates a void, and conspiracies are more than happy to rush in and fill that empty space with sensational secret plots. But when you understand the often boring, bureaucratic reality of civic processes, these wild, cinematic claims become a whole lot less believable. Now, while it's crucial that we protect ourselves, the source material makes it very clear that tech platforms have a massive responsibility here too. Social media companies need to shift from a reactive approach, waiting for bad press or real-world violence to occur, to a distinctly proactive approach. They need dedicated teams seeking out extremist activity before it blooms, recognizing that this stuff is a severe threat to the social fabric. So to wrap up the core takeaway of today's explainer, we cannot control the internet's algorithms. We can't single-handedly change how platforms reward provocation, but we can absolutely control our own digital media diets. Taking responsibility for our media consumption, maintaining healthy skepticism, and actively verifying sources, that is our strongest shield against manipulation. I want to leave you with one final thought. The internet is an amazing tool, but it's also a marketplace where your attention and your emotions are literal commodities. Next time you feel the urge to click a highly provocative link or share a sensational claim, will you stop to ask yourself, who profits from my outrage? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and I'll catch you next time.